In this lecture, I am discussing about the image, that is the img tag. In HTML, image tag is used to display the image on a web page. Let's take a look at an example and the syntax. So if you are using IDEs like VS Code or Sublime, you can declare the image tag by simply writing the letters like, I'll say img and will press enter. You can see the image tag is declared with attributes src, which is the source, or you can say the path or URL of the image. It basically tells the browser where it can find the image on the server. Let's try to give an image here. I will write image name. Right now this image is stored in the very same folder where the index.html is. Do note that images are not inserted into the web pages. They are more like links to the web pages. Let's save this and check the browser. And you can see the image is getting displayed. The second attribute is the alt, that is ALT. Now this is used to define alternate text for an image. So it basically describes the text in case the image is not rendered. I will show you how. Let me give an alternate name to this image here. I'll say meeting. Now suppose the image is not getting rendered in any case, then the text given with alt attribute is displayed. For example, let me make this file unavailable by renaming it. Now let me just refresh. So when the web page cannot find the image, this text is displayed. You can see the alternate text which we have given is displayed while the browser cannot find the image on the server. So this is what alternate attribute does. It is considered to be a very helpful from search engine optimization perspective. Now you do not store images in the same folder where your HTML files are. Certainly you will have different folders like assets or maybe images where you keep your images. Let me just give you an example here. Right now this image file is inside c:/HTML basics/img folder. So this is what I'm specifying here. And this way is also called as absolute path, which is not recommended, but I will explain what is absolute and what is the other way, that is the relative path. But at the moment, let me give this path and let's save this and let's refresh. And you see that the image is getting displayed. Remember, giving the absolute path is not a good practice, as generally we use the relative path, which I'm discussing in the next lecture. There are two more attributes which are used with image tag, and those are width and height. So let's go ahead and define those two attributes as well. I'll say width is equal to 800 and height is equal to 500. Now these attributes are not used lately, rather applying CSS to resize the image is more effective way. But let's see what is the output. Let's just refresh and you can see that the image is resized. Now what if you want to make an image clickable or provide a link to the image? You already have seen the anchor tag and that comes in help. So you just have to put this image tag inside the anchor tag. That's it. Let's do that. Here I'll say anchor href. I'll open a test.html when the user clicks on the image tag. Let me end the anchor tag here. Let's save this and go to the browser and let's refresh. And now you see that the image is clickable. The mouse pointer changes and I'm allowed to click. Let's do that. And this opens the test.html, which shows the message hello. So this is how you can work with the img, that is image tag. It's very simple and easy to use. The question here is, what is the purpose of the alt, that is the alternate text attribute? So we have the alt attribute, the important point here I want to discuss or I want to emphasize is that when your web page is configured with the search engines, that is SEO, in those cases when the images have the alt attribute, then it really helps, it improves the performance while the pages are optimized for search engines. Now I am discussing the difference between relative path and absolute path. When it comes to linking files inside the HTML document, a confusion may arise when giving a path, which can be relative path or absolute path. Let us see an example so you can understand the difference between relative and absolute path. So I have already defined the basic HTML code with the img tag here. Now I want to display these images inside my HTML document. Currently the images are in the assets folder, and both the index.html file and assets folder are in the development folder, as you can see. I'm assuming that this development folder is in a way your development server, and you are developing the project on the development server, which we will later push to production and see what happens when you give the absolute path. So I will try to display the images using the absolute path. The absolute path is nothing but the full URL to the file. So what I will do is I will go to the assets folder and will copy the path from above. This path links with the web page and tells them where it can find the images. Now I will paste the path here in the src and will give the image name. So this is what an absolute path looks like. Like right now we have c:/ whatever. You may have www dot the site name / the rest of the path. So basically that's what the absolute path is. Remember, it's very crucial that you give the correct path every time, otherwise image won't get displayed on the web page. Now let's check the output, and you see that image is displayed. Let's try to display other images as well. Now if you are using the VS Code, then you can directly copy the path of an image like this. So this will copy the absolute path of the image. I will paste it here. And now you can see the images are getting displayed, so we have used the absolute path so far. Now assume that the code is shifted to production server, and to create that scenario, I will move the files to production folder, which will actually change the path for all the images because I am shifting the index and the assets folder as well. Now when I open this web page, you can see the images are gone. For obvious reasons, the paths are now changed for every image. So once again, I will have to change this absolute path. So we'll copy the path from the production folder like this and we'll change the path. Alright, now when I refresh the page, you can see the images are getting displayed once again. So this is what working with absolute path looks like. When you give the absolute path, that means the path to the file is fixed. So if by any chance the images or files are shifted, there will be an issue accessing those files. So giving the absolute path is not an ideal way to display or access any file. On the other hand, giving the relative path can solve this kind of problems. Let's go back to the development folder and apply the relative path. I will start by giving a dot and a / where the dot refers to the current folder. Now, if this is in the development, then dot refers to development. If it is in the production folder, then the dot refers to the production folder. So dot means the current folder. Double dot means the parent folder. These are the basics, and I expect that you know dot and double dot. So at the beginning of the path, I will put a dot here and a /, and that shows me the assets folder. I will select the image and will do the same for the rest of the paths. So this is what relative path looks like. Let me just save this. Let's check the output, and you see that now for the development folder, this relative path is working fine. Now the real test is, what if I again shift this index and the assets folder to the production folder? Let's try that. And now let's check the output, and without any changes, this thing is working absolutely fine. So this is the advantage of using the relative path. And relative paths are URL independent, as it refers to the current folder regardless of where the files are. There is a relative question here that explains the difference between relative and absolute path, and that's what we have seen, that you give the dot, that is the current folder, and the rest of the path remains same. So regardless of where you put your files, it's going to refer the current folder. Browser will not have any issue accessing those files when the path is changed. Let's discuss about the HTML input tag now. The input tag is used to create input fields inside an HTML document, which allows users to input the data. Mainly, the input tag is used to create a form with various fields of input like text box, checkbox, radio button, email, numeric, etc. Let's understand it with an example. So let's first try to create a field for entering text values. So for that, I will give here an input tag, and you can see when I press enter, it gets defined with the attribute type. This type equal to text means you are allowed to type alphanumeric values or any other characters for that matter. Let me just add some text like first name, so user understands that this is where one has to enter the first name. Normally we use a label tag, which we will see when we develop more advanced forms. Also, the input tag is a self-closing tag, so you don't need to write the end input like this, but you need to end the tag with a slash inside the input itself like this. That is self-closing. Now let's check the output. You can see we have created a field for entering the name. Now for all the input whose type is text, it's a good practice to assign them with an additional attribute called placeholder. I will show you how it can be useful. I'll simply add the attribute placeholder and will display a message saying enter your first name. Now when I open the browser, you can see that inside the text box there is a gray colored message getting displayed, which is a message for the end user. One can easily understand what will be the value one can enter. This is what a placeholder is. The moment I click on the text box and try to enter any character, you can see the message gets disappeared. So it's a good practice to give a placeholder message for users' clarity. Let me show you few more fields we can try using input. I will add another text field saying last name. I will give 2 break tags here, and let's say I want to give an age field. Now for the input type, I won't be using the text. Instead, I will give the number as input type. I will explain what this does when we switch to the output. I will also give the placeholder here. Let me also add break tags here as well. Saving this, and let's check the browser. Now when I roll over the mouse to the age field, you can see it's giving me the option also called as spinners to change the age. So type equal to number will force the user to enter numeric values only. The type number has the built-in validation to reject non-numeric values. You can also set limit to the number type by just giving the min and max attribute. Like here, let me set the minimum value to 15. Now when I try to select the age will start from 15 itself, as you can see. So this is what type equal to number is used for. Let's add a field for email now. I will say email, and then I'll say input type equal to email and a placeholder also. So this will allow us to create a field specifically for email. Let's check the output. There we have the email field. Now if I try to give an incomplete email address, it will show me an alert message when I roll over the mouse on the field. If I write email like this, it will still show me an alert message saying the part after the @ sign is missing. So when we give input type email, the input value is validated or checked automatically for the proper email format. So this is how you can use input tag. We will see how you can add checkboxes and radio buttons in the next lecture. Now let's talk about relative questions. So the question is, how can you create an input where only the valid email is allowed? Well, you have various ways to validate the email. While you are doing JavaScript programming, you have the regular expression to implement that. But in a very simple manner, using HTML, if you want to implement the validation, certainly with input, you give type equal to email and that will do the job. The second question is, what is the purpose of placeholder attribute? The placeholder attribute basically gives a message inside the input field, that is a text box, and the moment you start typing some value, that automatically vanishes. It's a good way to show user-friendly messages for entering the values. Now let's move further with the input tag. We will see two more input types, that is checkbox and radio button. So I will be using the same code. I'll say coding languages here, and the input type will be checkbox. So this will create a checkbox inside your HTML document. Let me give few more checkboxes. Checkbox basically allows users to select the true or false option. Let me refresh the page and you can see that all these checkboxes remain unchecked. But what if I want certain checkboxes to stay selected when the page is loaded? That is, in the beginning I want that the checkbox should be selected. So for that, there is an attribute called checked, which will keep the checkbox selected whenever the page gets loaded in the browser, that is selected by default initially. Let me give checked attribute to few fields. Now when I refresh the page, you can see that the checkboxes with the checked attributes are already selected. Now let's see radio buttons. Defining radio buttons means you just have to say type equal to radio. Here I'm going to define a field gender, and for that I'm using two radios. So I'll say input type equal to radio, male, and again one more input type, and here I'll just type female as text. So you can see now there are two radio buttons, and if I click on male or female, you can see that they both are getting selected. Whereas with radio button interface, only one option should be selected at a time and the other should get deselected automatically. To set only one radio button selected out of multiple radios, you have to set the name attribute to the same value. This is also known as radio group, which means each of the radio button in the group must be given the same name. Let's check this practically. Here, let me give the name attribute inside these radio buttons, and I'm going to give gender to both the radio buttons. So this becomes a group when I give same name to multiple radio buttons. Let's save this and check the output. So now if I select, you see that the other is getting deselected automatically. Let's add two more radio buttons. I'll copy these two and paste it again. Now they have the same name. I want married and unmarried with these two radio buttons. Let's save this and check what is the output. You can see that if I click on male, female, married or unmarried, only one option is selected out of these four options. Now this is something not we want. We want that only male or female should be selected, and married and unmarried is a different option. So in that case, I will have a second group called am status. So let me change these two, married and unmarried, to the very same group, but not the gender. Let's save this, and now you see that male and female, married or unmarried, the selection is going the way we want. So this is the basic idea about checkbox and radio button. We will use a lot when we create forms in the forthcoming advanced sections. Now let's talk about relative questions. So how can you define a checkbox whose value remains selected on the page load? So by using the attribute checked, you can achieve this, as we have seen here in this example. The second question is, what is radio grouping? So radio group is basically giving the same name to multiple options, and if you give the same name, that means out of those radios, the user is allowed to select only one. The rest of the radio from the same group will be automatically deselected. In this lecture, I am discussing HTML select tag. The select tag is used to create a drop-down list with various options inside the HTML document. Let's see an example and discuss the syntax. Let's say I want to create a drop-down list for coding languages. So I will define the text first, suggesting what this drop-down is about. And then I will define select tag, and between these two tags, the list options are given by using the option tag. So if I give here our first option saying HTML, this will be displayed as the first item inside the list. Let's add few more items to the list. I'll say JavaScript, React, Node.js, Java and PHP. So you can see the list is displayed. Now if you want to further nest the list items, showing which languages are front end and back end, you can do that by giving the option group, which creates separate groups of options inside the drop down. So I will say OPT group, that is option group, and I will label it with front end. So this is going to be a group, a kind of category inside the same drop down. Similarly, I'll display backend here. And now let's check the output. So you can see that we have divided the list options in groups. There are also few attributes which can be used when required. Now let's check the size attribute. By default, the interface is drop down, but let's say you want to show list items in a scrollable box like this. Then you can use the size attribute. When you don't want the drop down and want to show a box with the list, you decide the number of rows displayed at a time. Let's give size attribute to 3 and check the output. Now you can see that the interface has changed. There is no drop down, but instead it is showing a list of items in a clickable box with scroll bars. And because we have given the size 3, there are only 3 rows displayed at a time. Rest of the items are in the scrollable section. The next attribute is disabled, which allows you to disable an option. So if I disable this option, for example, HTML, and let's see the output, you can see I cannot select this HTML option as it is disabled. The select tag is very commonly used interface when it comes to showing dynamic data list items. Now let's talk about relative questions. So the first question is, what does the select tag do? So as discussed, it displays the drop down or even the list with the box. Not necessary always you need a drop down. Drop down basically saves the space on the screen, but sometimes let's say you want to show the list of items straight away on the screen inside a box, you can use the same select tag but with a size attribute. The second question is, how to create a group inside the select tag list. So for creating a group, we use the opt group, that is option group tag, like we have done here in this example, and that creates group for the items. Now there is a practical question that write a program to display a list of items with the following interface and make HTML and Java options disabled. Alright, so looking at the interface, you can tell it's not a drop down, but it's a scrollable box. So we will have to use the size attribute, and let's say we want to show 5 items, so we'll say size is equal to 5, and to disable the HTML and Java options, I'll say disable attribute here with this option and here as well with Java. And now let's check the output, so you get the desired result. In this video, I'm going to discuss the most practical way of difference between HTML and XHTML. To understand the concept, I have prepared one HTML which is not XHTML, and we are going to convert this HTML into XHTML so you get the idea about how the HTML and XHTML differs. Though the code which I have written right now is also not HTML, it is a very bad way of writing the HTML. But I just want to prove that XHTML is a strict and a better way of writing HTML. Right now the page which you see starts with straight away the HTML. It has the body, it does have a paragraph, but as you see that the H1 doesn't have any end of it. The next thing is the H2 which I have placed here is not in small case, it is in uppercase. The H is in uppercase. Also with H3 I have written the style, but you see that the style is also in uppercase, and the color which I do not put in any kind of quotes, be it double quotes or single quotes. So this is not the right way, or you can say that you do not see this kind of HTML generally. But the best part of HTML is, which is in a way worst part, there is no error coming anywhere. If I just run the particular page, you will see the output as it is desired. Let me just open the browser and you see that this is how it looks. So now you see that we have this paragraph, the header, which doesn't have any end, but because somehow it found the structure and it continued with header 2. The BR tag is also there, which adds a line, and then we have the H3. So what my point here is that HTML does not give any error, but at the same time, as a developer, people or the developers community follow some rules to write the HTML to make it standard. And that strict way, that standard way is called as XHTML. So let's say if I want to convert this page into XHTML, the very first thing I'll take care of is that I'll write the doc type. Now the next thing is, you always should have an end of every tag. So this H1 should always have an end tag. That's a right structure. In fact, even in HTML, let's say there is some structure which is getting disturbed. Even in HTML, the output may not be as desired, but it will not give error. Even in XHTML, it's not that once you follow the XHTML rules, it is going to give you any error. It doesn't give any error. It is a kind of standard which programmers follow to write the code, right? Because it's always good to follow some standards. Many programmers are working on the same code, or even you yourself, when you open your program after a few days, you may not get the idea what is written and what is written where. So you generally follow standards and rules so that the code is easy to debug or the code is easy to maintain. And that's what XHTML does. You have to follow those rules. Then it is called as XHTML. Though there are sites which give you that it is XHTML standard followed or not kind of validation. Now I have the end tag of this H1. So now I can say that I'm following XHTML at least for this one. For this line, when I say that I want to follow XHTML, I will convert the capital letter into small. That is, uppercase tags are not something which you put when you write or when you follow the XHTML standard. Now you have observed that even H was capital earlier, it was not giving error. But it's just that I'm following a rule of XHTML that I will not use uppercases while there are HTML or CSS related tags or rules. Here also the same thing I will do. Attributes should also be in lowercase, right? Then the attribute values should always be in double quotes. This is also another XHTML rule. Earlier, this all was working fine. There was no issue. So don't judge that XHTML is something which will make sure that there will be an error if rules are not followed. There is no error. You saw in the beginning that without these things also it was working fine. It's just that as a developer, you take it seriously that you follow standard while writing the code. The same way, what another thing can be done is, see, this h3 tag has some content in between. So when there is a content in between, I'm going to have an end of the tag. But what about this BR, the break tag? It doesn't have any content in between. That means it is an empty tag. Even if you have an empty tag, that should also have an end. How do you end that? I will just self-close it or self-end it. This is how I'm going to end even the empty tag. Let's say in case if you have an input tag, for example, I write input, type is equal to, let's say, text. See this? Attribute is in lowercase and attribute value is in double quotes. Now, this does not have any content in between. So it's a kind of empty tag. I'm going to end it like this. So this is another XHTML rule which I am following here. So like BR, you also have another HR, which is an empty tag. So that should also have an end like this. As I mentioned, if you don't write like this, let's say I don't write this ending slash, is it going to give me error or will it not work? No, the HR will certainly display the horizontal rule. That is the line. But the thing is, because you are following the standard, you will follow all XHTML rules. And that is the difference between XHTML and HTML. Let me list out the differences once again with the code sample so you get the idea. So here it is. Up till now, we have seen a lot of HTML tags and learned their concepts. Now in this lecture, I am discussing about one more important concept, that is semantic tags. This concept is introduced in the newer version of HTML, that is the HTML5. So before we start understanding what semantic tags are, let me show an example. Suppose we have an address to display like this. Now this address is placed inside a division. Certainly it is going to display the address. There is no issue at all. Now if I want to use the semantic tag concept, what I will do, instead of this division, I will put the address tag. Let's check the output. So you see the address is displayed and also the font style is changed to italic. But that is not our purpose. That is not something which we want to observe. The point which I want to make is that looking at this code, a developer or a person who is not familiar with HTML can easily make out that this content which we have should be an address, which by reading the div tag one cannot make out. Well, it's not about whether it is readable to the developer or not, but the important point is your site should have the accessibility, which means that people with, let's say, visual challenges should also be able to refer to your site. Now, how does this happen? It actually happens by using the screen reader softwares. These softwares help people listen to the content of the site. So when the screen reader software tries to speak the content of the site for visually challenged people, for example, if it reads this code, then it will be div, then the address, and the div ends. But with this code, you see that the address is inside the address tag. So the screen reader will start reading the tag and it will say address, it will start reading the address and then the address ends. That makes the difference. So if you see this code, the address tag, which has a meaningful tag name, is called as semantic tag. it makes a meaning to the person who is referring to the content. So in short, semantic tags are nothing but meaningful tag names. If you put a div or address, it doesn't make any difference to the developer or even to the browser, but it does make a difference to the person who is referring the content, or in other words, it is more organized and readable code as well. So this is the idea behind using the semantic tags. Now let's check two more semantic tags. Normally a section can be written using a div tag, but in a web page we can use header tag for header section and footer tag for footer section of the page. Remember, by giving header or footer tag, it does not put the content on top or the bottom of the page. It's just that you categorize the sections with meaningful tag names. That is, using the HTML5 semantic tags to design a page. So for example, I give the header tag here, and inside I want to give, let's say, an H1, and will give the heading here. So this becomes the header of the web page. Now about the footer, it is used to give footers to the web page. Yes, a web page may contain multiple footers as well. So the footer looks something like this. All these are included in footers. You can give logo, navbar, links, text, whatever you want inside this footer tag as well. So you can define footer by giving the footer tag. Again, remember, it is the CSS code which will arrange the footer at the bottom of the page, not the footer tag only. So let's give some content inside. Now, how about we create a section? So rather than giving div, I will use section tag here. Let's add some content also. The section tag is also an HTML semantic tag which is used to define a section inside the web page. And now let's check the output. You can see we have defined all of this by using semantic tags only. So you can say this is pure HTML5 page. Of course, there are many things missing, but whatever we have used is following the semantic tag rules. So the main purpose of using the semantic tag or meaningful tag names is to provide better accessibility. Here are few semantic tags which we will see as and when required. Now let's talk about a relative question. So the question is, what is semantic tag and why to use semantic elements in building a web page? We have already seen that they are the meaningful tag names, and just to increase the accessibility of the web page, we use semantic tags.